Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett attempted to corner JD Vance with a politically charged emotional attack. But what she got in response was an unexpected and harsh lesson. The hearing room wasn't loud, but it wasn't completely quiet either. A low hum filled the air as cameras recorded, with every word poised to become a headline. Before we dive into the details, let us know where you're watching from. And don't forget to subscribe so you never miss the latest updates. Federal housing reform was the official topic, but for many in the room, it was more than that. It was a struggle for power, a fight for dominance. As Jasmine Crockett adjusted her microphone and leaned forward, she believed she had the advantage. Opposite her sat Vice President JD Vance, his hair neatly styled, his tie slightly loosened with purpose, radiating the confidence of a strategist who knew he was ahead. Crockett hadn't yet struck, but her sharp gaze suggested she had already identified her opportunity to undermine Vance. Yet Vance didn't waver, watching her like a chess player anticipating a mistake. He had come prepared, armed not just with data, but with a plan to ensnare his opponent. He had studied Crockett, predicting she would rely on emotion. As the chair concluded the introduction, Crockett seized the microphone, her eyes scanning the room like a gladiator stepping into the arena. She stood tall, shoulders squared, her voice firm and deliberate, each word carefully chosen to wound her adversary. The murmurs in the room faded, leaving only the faint clicks of cameras and the scribbling of reporters' pens. Crockett knew all eyes were on her, and she intended to turn this moment into a triumph. "Colleagues," she began, her tone low but cutting. "We're here to discuss housing, but I cannot remain silent while failed policies push my constituents into despair." She fixed her stare on Vance, who sat motionless, his hands resting lightly on a stack of documents. "Vice President Vance," she continued, emphasizing his title like a weapon, "has repeatedly opposed bills that would provide affordable housing to those who need it most. He sides with the privileged, not the people in Dallas struggling to pay rent." Crockett's voice rose, thick with emotion. "In my district, families are crammed into run-down apartments, walls stained with mold, roofs leaking every time it rains. I met a mother, Maria, working 2 jobs a day, yet still unable to afford a 2-bedroom home. Her 10-year-old son does his homework by flashlight because their electricity was shut off. This isn't just one story, it's the reality for thousands." She paused, letting her words sink in, then pressed on. "Yet you, Mr. Vice President, turn your back on them, voting against federal funds that could repair those roofs and restore power to those homes." The audience murmured, some nodding in sympathy, but the more observant noticed a flaw. Crockett was relying on anecdotes, not facts. She continued, her voice growing fiercer. "The administration you represent, with its harsh immigration policies and favoritism toward the elite, has abandoned communities like mine. Dallas isn't just a city, it's home to workers, taxpayers, people who deserve dignity. But you choose to stand with those building mansions, not those building this nation." Her voice trembled slightly as she pushed further. "Vance, have you ever stepped foot in a neighborhood like South Dallas, where children play on sidewalks because parks are unsafe? Have you heard the cries of families evicted because they couldn't pay rent? Or do you only see numbers on paper, numbers you use to justify slashing aid?" She finished with a light tap on the table, her eyes challenging Vance. A smattering of applause broke out, but most waited for his response. Throughout her speech, Vance remained still, hands clasped, head slightly tilted like a scientist observing an experiment. His eyes never left Crockett, and the faintest hint of a smirk played at his lips, a detail almost no one caught. He had anticipated her approach, emotional appeals, sharp accusations, but no substantive data. In his mind, each of her words only tightened the trap he had set. Crockett, mistaking his silence for weakness, leaned forward. "I'm not here for political games, Mr. Vance. I'm here for people like Maria, who have no voice in this room. You may vote against them, but I won't let them be forgotten." She sat down, still locking eyes with him, convinced she had gained the upper hand. But she didn't see what was unfolding beneath the surface. Vance had noted every flaw in her argument, the lack of data, the personal attacks, the reliance on emotion over logic. An aide behind him gave a subtle nod, as if confirming everything was going as planned. The cameras caught Vance picking up his pen, jotting a note, then looking up, his gaze sharp as steel. The room tensed, sensing a clash brewing. A journalist whispered, "She just challenged the wrong person." Crockett, still confident, didn't realize she had stepped into a chess match Vance had long prepared for. When the chair called his name, Vance leaned toward the microphone, his calm but piercing gaze silencing the room. The energy from Crockett's fiery speech had dissipated, replaced by an expectant hush.
He didn't rush. He cleared his throat, letting the silence stretch just enough to command attention, then began with a polite smile, as if inviting Crockett deeper into his trap.
"Congresswoman Crockett," he said, his voice measured and clear, "I appreciate your passion, especially the story about Maria. Stories like that remind us housing isn't just policy, it's about real lives. He paused, glancing at the audience. But if we stop at stories, we'll never fix those leaking roofs. His words, though soft, cut deep. A few in the crowd nodded. Vance opened a folder, pulling out a highlighted document. Let me share some numbers, because the people deserve truth, not just emotion. He held up the paper, not boastfully, but to emphasize his readiness. According to a federal report, Dallas housing programs have received billions over the past decade. Yet homelessness has risen 22% in 5 years, and eviction rates are among the nation's highest. Congresswoman, if federal funds are the solution, why are the results the opposite? The room grew quieter, only the scratching of pens breaking the silence. Crockett gripped her microphone, lips tight, searching for a rebuttal. Vance didn't let her recover. I'm not criticizing Dallas. I'm pointing out that pouring money into mismanaged programs isn't the answer. People like Maria don't need promises, they need real solutions. His tone shifted, becoming more personal. I grew up in Middletown, Ohio, in a neighborhood where leaky roofs were common. My mother had to choose between paying the electric bill or buying food. We nearly lost our home. I share this not to compete with you, Congresswoman, but to say I understand hardship. But I also know emotion doesn't pay the bills. The audience murmured, drawn in by his authenticity. He sharpened his tone again. You accused me of voting against housing bills, but you admitted that those bills were bloated with waste, millions never reaching those in need. I voted no because taxpayer money must be used wisely, for Dallas and Middletown alike. His gaze locked onto Crockett, silently declaring, you miscalculated. Crockett, feeling the pressure, tried to interject. Mr. Vice President, she said, her voice shaking with anger, you can't blame local leadership when your policies cut aid for the poor. But her rebuttal lacked substance, no data, no specifics. Vance smiled faintly, not in triumph, but in quiet confidence. Congresswoman, I'm not blaming, I'm demanding accountability. If Dallas received billions, why are families like Maria still in unsafe homes? Where did the money go? Who's responsible? His question struck like an arrow, leaving Crockett staring at her notes, her grip tightening. He pressed on, his tone edged with sarcasm. You criticize this administration, yet it's created millions of jobs, helping people afford rent. Meanwhile, your favored programs leave families waiting years for vouchers. If that's justice, we need to redefine the word. Crockett tried to counter, her voice rising. You can't talk about jobs when people need housing now. But her words faltered. No facts, no evidence. She sat frozen as the room absorbed Vance's dismantling of her argument. The audience, once sympathetic to her passion, now saw her lack of preparation. Vance closed with a devastating line. Congresswoman, you may move hearts, but moved hearts don't pay rent. If you truly want to help, bring solutions, not tears. The room erupted in applause, long, loud, decisive. Crockett sat defeated, her energy drained. A Democratic senator whispered, she never stood a chance. The moment went viral. Social media exploded with clips of Vance's final rebuttal. Comments flooded in, Vance destroyed Crockett with facts. Emotion isn't enough, you need data. Even critics conceded his mastery. In the days that followed, Vance leveraged his victory, proposing a housing bill focused on efficiency and local solutions. His career surged as Republicans hailed him as a rising star. Crockett, meanwhile, returned to Dallas facing criticism. Supporters stood by her, but many questioned her preparedness. Political rivals circled, sensing vulnerability. The clash became a lesson in politics. Passion matters, but without preparation, it fails. Logic, data, and strategy win debates, and shape policy. Vance's triumph wasn't just personal, it reshaped the conversation on poverty, proving that accountability and action, not just emotion, drive real change.